Well, hey everyone, happy Thursday. Welcome to So What, the Marketing Analytics and Insights live show. I'm Katie, joined by Chris and John. Howdy,
Hello.
fellas.
Hello.
This week, we are talking about how to get started with Hermes, not Hermes, Hermes agent and autonomous AI agents. This is going to be a tough one for me because for all of the years I've been on this planet, I've always known Hermes to say Hermes, which is the brand, the luxury brand. But now this is Hermes, which just sounds wrong. But anyway, here we are. Part of what we want to know is what the heck is it? And, Chris, you've been talking about the Hermes large language model, the Hermes agent for about a month, if I recall correctly. And I never stopped to ask you what it is. So what is it?
So we've talked about, and if you haven't heard it already, it's in the Trust Insights newsletter. It's on the Trust Insights podcast. It's in previous episodes of the Trust Insights live stream, of all of which you can get at trustinsights.ai. The 5 levels of AI. So level 1, done by you. You're the chat GPT copy paste monkey. Level 2, gems and GPTs, standard operating procedures. Level 3, agents, systems like Claude Code, Claude Cowork, etc. That are where you go from being an individual contributor to being a manager. Level 4 is where autonomous agents sit. These are like employees, right? So these are almost like a virtual person of sorts. And this is a whole family, the most famous of which is Peter Steinberger's OpenClaw, which it was December that came out, and it just shook the world. OpenAI bought that entire thing as quickly as they could, but it spawned a huge number of copies. So there's NemoClaw from NVIDIA. There is Deerflow from ByteDance. And there's Hermes Agent from Noose Hermes, the Noose research company. They're all pretty much the same thing. They are a more autonomous wrapper around a language model of some kind. And as with all these, you could swap in different models. So you could use Gemini if you wanted to. You could use Claude Opus if you wanted to, and you like paying thousands of dollars in monthly bills. But this thing is a harness. It's basically a collection of apps. The reason why I like Hermes Agent over the other ones right now, and why Anthropic, for example, this week released some features in their own agents that copy some of the Hermes Agent, is that Hermes Agent is self-learning. As you do more with it, it writes its own skills. It writes its own plugins. It figures out, oh, you keep asking me to do this thing, so I'm just going to turn it into a skill because it's stupid for you to keep asking me the same thing over and over again. And that's sort of what this thing is. It is, like I said, the easiest way to think about it is a virtual employee.
Okay, so in a nutshell, if I understood that correctly, things like the Hermes agent is a front end to the large language models, which you can pick your favorite one, which is the back end. And so if we think about it like the Google form that sits on top of the Excel spreadsheet, or, the query screen that sits on top of the database, something that you can use, that an average person can use to access the bigger thing that's happening in the background, the bigger software.
And the front end has a lot of rules built into it that make it work better. So let me give you an example that is not Hermes Agent that we can just see, so that we can sort of make this more concrete. If I go into our Claude desktop application here, and I go to the developer menu, and I select third-party inference, I get a preferences window that pops up. And this allows me to change the brain of Claude Cowork. I can change it to Google Vertex, AWS Bedrock, or my own gateway. So I have it set for the Chinese company Minimax. This allows me to use Claude Cowork with somebody else's models. It's called third-party inference. For really big companies, for example, we have a very large client that has their own AI hub internally. They have their own systems and servers, and they want to be able to use Claude Cowork, but they do not want to use Anthropic servers. So they have their own server, and their teams would put this in, company.com/Anthropic. And suddenly Claude Cowork works with that model as the engine instead of Anthropic's models. So exactly what you're saying, Katie. This is the front end. And then you're pulling out the engine and putting in a different engine.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I mean, it's not overly technical, but I'm struggling to keep up because it feels like just on that cusp of technical enough that I'm sort of sitting here going, "Wait, what just happened?" Um, before we move forward, John, any questions?
Yeah, I mean, would you consider this like workflow management really? Because it's organizing and categorizing and then plugging into the engines, or like what would be another way you would just define this as far as what the user needs?
So here's how I think about this. If you look here, these are all the models I have access to on my Minimax subscription, right? Within Claude Cowork. So we're in Cowork, but I'm using Minimax. I use this during the daytime so that I'm not chewing up Trust Insight's very valuable Anthropic token so that Katie and Kelsey and you can work in Cowork and use the smartest models. And I will use this also. You can see here at the very bottom, Framingham Municipal Budget Audit. I want to audit the mayor's budget. That is not a good use of Anthropic's valuable tokens, right? That is not a good use of Trust Insight's work resources. So I put in the cheap model, and now I can do fun stuff and not damage the company's ability to have the best resources for the paying work that people pay us to do.
You know what? It all clicked when you showed me that drop down of which models you have access to. Like when you were just showing the settings of like showing like gateway and other things, it was still a little like vague in my brain. But then you showed here's the front end UI. So you're using Claude desktop as the example, but we're going to be talking about the Hermes agent, which is sort of like you just swap out Claude for the Hermes agent, and then the model you're using Minimax versus Opus.
Correct.
Okay, I'm with you now. Like there's definitely something about seeing it that it all just kind of clicked together. I'm like, okay, now I understand.
Exactly. So Claude Cowork is what we call a level 3 system. You can delegate a lot to it. And, Katie, you've certainly spoken a lot about how like you have literally 100x your output in the last 3 months compared to previously. Mm-hmm. Hermes agent is the next evolution of that for things that are extremely long running tasks where you're like, you know what? I don't need to babysit you on this. Maybe you're going to go out and research something. Maybe you're going to go out and build something. And as long as I provide it a really solid plan and good technology, it will pretty much figure it out. Here's the caveats before we get into the nuts and bolts. All of these autonomous agents can potentially be hijacked by prompt injection, right? If they browse a questionable site and they misinterpret the instructions. All of them, especially if you use a very smart model like Claude Opus, can potentially break out of their own environment. So if you were to run Hermes agent on your desktop computer, your work computer, and you've got valuable stuff in there, it might say, you know what, I might make use of that. And they're like, no, you're not allowed to go in that directory. And it was like, yeah, I am.
Gotcha.
So our caution is at the very least, you want to run it in a container of some kind, but the best practice is don't run it on a production work system. Put it on a box that you don't care about, that you can just literally pull the cord out of the wall if it starts to misbehave, and no one's going to be upset. Do not put it on your work computer. Do not put it on your personal computer. If you can't afford a box at home, which is totally reasonable, you can buy a VPS from a company like Hetzner or Linode or Akamai for like $8 a month. But you want to keep it in its own environment.
That was going to be my question is, can you purchase like a virtual machine basically? Because it sounds like we used to do that when I was in software. We would do our QA, our quality assurance on virtual machines so that we could have replicas of different environments, different combinations of operating systems and browsers. And we would do that all in a virtual machine versus having hundreds of physical machines. And so it sounds like that's a good option for someone who has a physical machine and can't afford to or have the space for another one. But to your point, you want to have this very sort of quarantined and self-contained so that it's not doing things that you don't want it to do, because AI is still, for as much as we've learned about it, it's still unpredictable and it still hallucinates. So you want to really give it very, very, very strong guardrails.
Yes. Now, the other thing to know about these level 4 systems is that they are very, very compute intensive. So you probably, you can choose any model to work with. They will make hundreds of API calls an hour, potentially more. So if they're not hooked up to something that can do that in a cost-effective manner, boy, are you getting a bill. In the early days of OpenClaw, people tied it to their Anthropic subscriptions. One poor sap on Reddit said, I ran, it was called Claudebot at the time. I ran Claudebot overnight and I have a $10,000 Anthropic bill.
You know, there's a reason I always tell you guys I don't like surprises. And that is a really good example of, really sort of planning ahead so you don't get that kind of a surprise. Nobody wants a $10,000 surprise.
Exactly. So these agents can run on pretty much any computer that can serve up a basic Linux environment, which means if you've got an old laptop from like a MacBook from 2016 that's just laying around, you can format it and install Linux on it and bring that computer back to life. You could probably run even on something like a 2010, 2011 MacBook. So if you've got old stuff laying around, and you don't need to buy brand new hardware because you're probably not going to be doing the AI part on machine. You're just serving up the software and you'll connect some AI to it. Now, in terms of models to choose, obviously you have all the major ones that everybody knows about, OpenAI, Gemini, etc. Those are very expensive. The one that I recommend for people just starting out is the Minimax model, because they have a subscription specifically for like agents like this that is very generous and extremely cost effective. To run this agent around the clock, the $100 a year plan is probably the best plan. Now, there are some folks who are doing this with local machinery. So if you, one of our friends bought the NVIDIA DGX Spark, which is a $5,000 computer, but in running Google's Gemma 4, he basically bought his own miniature data center, put it on his desk, and then tied a Hermes agent. Actually, I think he was using OpenClaw. He tied one of these agents to that, and now that box now costs just the cost of electricity to run, plus paying off his credit card bill. But there's no more subscription to pay. Whereas the way I'm using it with Minimax because I paid the $100 a year.
And if I know we've covered local models in previous episodes of the live stream. So you can go to trustinsights.ai/YouTube, go to the So What playlist. But I also believe, if I'm not mistaken, that next week or in one of the upcoming weeks, Chris, you and John, surprise John, are going to be covering what's new with local models, how to set them up, like sort of go deeper into these use cases. So if you are curious about that, we'll be covering it in a future episode, but we also have previous episodes where we've touched on setting up a local model for yourself.
Yep, that'll be next week, I believe, is what's new with local models.
Yes.
And we'll probably be talking all sorts of crazy, weird nerd stuff. Okay, so you need a place to run this.
Mm-hmm.
And you need a compute plan of some kind, however you choose to do it. Again, my recommendation would be something like Minimax because of its generosity and because their model is smart enough. However, if you've got internal resources, if you've got your own compute, whatever AI you have, bring it to the party. If you absolutely positively can't use, for example, a provider like that's based in Singapore, like you have to be US based, Google's Gemini 3.1 Flash Lite is a pretty decent model, but you can still rack up a very hefty bill.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where it gets ugly, because this tool is not made for the average person. It's made for somebody who's very comfortable in a terminal. To get it set up, like, oh, these are the first two steps right here. Just copy this string, go into your Linux environment, and paste it, and you're off and running. It's a bit of an oversimplification.
A little bit.
Well, isn't that how senior citizens get all their bank accounts cleaned out too? It's just like paste these two things in your console.
Pretty much. That's how this kind of thing happened. But the assumption, I think the assumption is, if you're using something like this, you know what a Linux box is. Like it's not.
Well, they're definitely catering to a certain audience, which they absolutely should, because those are the people like you, Chris, that are looking to push the boundaries of what can be done. And the people who are looking to do that with the technology today are the people who are going deeper into it, who know what a Linux machine is, who are using terminal. Because, someone like me, I am a pretty savvy user, but I'm also not pushing the limits of what can be done. I'm just trying to keep my head above water with the amount of work that I have on my plate. That's sort of where I'm at with it. And I found ways to do that with the tools that are available. I'm not looking to push the boundaries. That's what this is for. Like, John, I'm fairly certain we can't find a really good use case for you to be spending your time doing this, given the nature of your job. Outside of work, maybe, but given the nature of your role, I could be wrong.
Well, yeah, this is that we got to see what he can do with this thing. As far as right now, it's just how do we install this thing? But let's see what
let's start at step one.
Exactly. So I've logged into the little tiny computer that I bought like 3 years ago. That has been sitting above my desk, mostly collecting dust. I finally got around to turning it on, installed all the stuff, and now if we run Hermes setup, so the install is there. It will say, how do you want to connect? Like, whose AI are you going to be using? Are you going to be using, there's all these different options. There's LM Studio for local models, Anthropic, OpenAI. There's all these different choices. And of course, I'm currently using the global direct API from Minimax, which is the international one. These are all the different possible choices that you could use with this thing. And there's a lot of really good options on here. Open Router, for example, is one that a lot of people use to control costs, because you can say, like, I don't want to spend more than this amount, and so on and so forth. There's Open Code, there's Alibaba, all the big players. So we'll say yes, we'll keep the configuration as it is. But this is the first step, is decide which model you want to use.
Can you change your mind? Can you?
Yes.
Okay.
And then Minimax is running local on that machine too?
No, Minimax, I'm using the Singapore data center.
Okay. So you're going out to the world.
Yeah, because I don't have enough hardware. I need to throw another Trust Insights workshop or something to afford to buy a machine that could run Minimax, because you need about $10,000 worth of hardware for it. Been vetoed.
I can think of a lot better things to do with $10,000. So anyway, so you've selected Minimax Global Direct API.
Yep. So it's going to talk to it that way. It's going to say, what is the base API, which you would get from their documentation. You would choose which model you're going to use of them, because they have different models. And I currently pay for the 2.7 model. And it says, hey, do you want to set up messaging? So once you get the setup, you don't have to use the terminal to control it anymore. You could, for example, set it up to talk to Slack, to talk to Discord, to talk to Telegram, and so on and so forth. So if I say set up messaging, it will say, what do you want to connect with? Do you want to be able to email? Do you want to be able to text your system, and so on and so forth?
Okay. So it's another layer of user interface for whatever you're comfortable with. So, if you wanted to just text it or email it or WhatsApp it, you could do that versus using the terminal window. Okay.
Exactly.
Which is, that's interesting. I appreciate the flexibility, especially for those of us who are already in a lot of different systems already. Adding one more, sometimes that's the tipping point, and you're like, well, I'm just never going to do it.
Mm-hmm. if I was going to put this into production as a production system for Trust Insights to use instead of a box that sits over my desk that I blow up from time to time, I would 100% set up Slack to work with this so that Katie, you or anyone in the company could kick off a project on Minimax just by talking to it in Hermes Agents, just by talking to it in a Slack channel. Say like, hey, today, why don't you go find me 5 prospects to talk to that are mid-market healthcare companies in Nebraska, and you would not need to dig into the internals and log into it. This is really getting the thing set up.
Yeah, no, and I can definitely appreciate that future state, and I think that behind the scenes we'll definitely keep talking about it because I can definitely see that being where we want to go. So yeah, I mean it's really cool to think about.
Yep.
Half of these things I don't know what they are. Like I know what IRC is. I don't know what Telegram is. I don't know what Ding Talk is. I don't know what Blue Bubbles is. Like, yeah. We don't need to get into my lack of understanding of the world.
Social network of the week here.
Yeah, exactly.
So those configurations are in place. Let's see. Yes, installed as a system background. Make it a system service. And now it says, hey, congratulations. Hermes is set up.
Yay.
And you're like, great. Now what?
Yeah. I mean, and that's exactly, it's like, okay, cool.
That's like every time I use terminal.
Yeah. Here's my little guy with the confetti. Like, congratulations.
So let's launch Hermes Chat and see what happens here. Oh, there we go. Welcome to Hermes Agent. Congratulations. Your agent is now running and that's the end of the episode. Bye. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, why is it the medical symbol?
I don't know. I don't know why it's a caduceus. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I didn't. Yeah. Because the first thing I noticed was like, it's very 70s colors. And then the medical, like, as if it's going to be a healthcare tool. So I'm a little nervous about that.
Yeah. Now.
Okay.
At this point, it's waiting for instructions. It's waiting for something to do. And this is now the most important part of this entire episode. This is still AI. This is still a language model, which means that you still have to, at this point, stop. I was going to go vanilla ice.
You going to collaborate?
No, instead, we're going to do the 5 Ps.
I mean, so technically, yes.
Yes, stop, collaborate. Okay. Before you go, just say, oh, just do this thing. That is so ambiguous that this system will do it, but it will do it badly. And we'll do it in a very unpredictable way. So it is at this point where you say, okay, imagine this is a virtual employee. With this virtual employee, what would you tell it to do? This is a brand new, in John's case, a brand new salesperson who just started, first day on the job. John, what would you tell a salesperson, a brand new sales associate, first day on the job? Oh, just go find some prospects.
No, the normal process is like learn everything about us. What is our product? What do we do? So educate yourself on the market.
Okay. In the 5P framework, how would you do that with that person?
Most of the time, as like a smaller business, you want somebody that's going to show up with all that already baked in, so it's like getting to that experience. So yeah, I don't know, from a 5P perspective, you'd say, hey, you need to understand everything that's being bought and sold by Trust Insights and who are the types of people that buy that. So as part of that, you and your agent should go out and scrub everything on the web as far as these tools, as far as AI training and adding AI to your business strategy. But yeah, I don't, then as far as as process and perform and platform. I mean, it's just kind of go out there and do it. Like there's no existing dependable resource to run with it. So I don't know. I would kind of stall out at that point.
May I chime in?
Absolutely.
I totally hear you, John. And so I think if we had someone starting tomorrow and we had to get them up to speed, you're absolutely right. So you would start with, here's all the foundational knowledge about who Trust Insights is, what we do, what we sell, who the team is, what they bring to the table, strengths, weaknesses, all that. We have all of that in our sales playbook. So we have all that information. So start there. The purpose of reading the sales playbook is to understand who the Trust Insights customer is and how to sell to them, what to sell them, the people involved, the Trust Insights team, and our ICPs. Who are the ICPs? That's also in the sales playbook. Process, read the thing, probably number one. And then number two, start going through the CRM to understand what has been done already, what the sales cycle looks like. And maybe start with a small proof of concept, start identifying what you think would be a good prospect. And that way it's sort of like a test of did you understand the material? Platform is a CRM, whatever they're reading it on, an Excel spreadsheet. And then the performance is, were you able to identify a prospect or a handful of prospects based on what you learned from the sales playbook? That's the way that I would frame it. And I think that, to be fair to you, John, number one, I developed the 5P framework, so I'm obviously going to have an easier time explaining it. But number two, I've also been deeper into the weeds with explaining exactly the process to agentic AI. And so I have a better sense of what Chris was after. And so, sorry to put you on the spot, but I know that's what Chris was after, is one of the things that we've been telling people is the 5P framework by Trust Insights, which you can learn more about at trustinsights.ai/5P-framework, it's the best way to prompt agentic AI. We have data that demonstrates the efficacy of the 5P framework in a prompt for agentic AI. And that's why we're trying to structure this conversation as if we were talking to someone brand new. The really silly example we gave on the podcast earlier this week, and if you want to check it out, it's at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast, is, so John, if I said to you, go to the store and get some milk, you would inherently make conclusions to I go to the store, I get the milk, I bring it to the cash register, I put it in my car, I bring it home, I put it in the fridge. You're filling in the blanks, but you can't leave that vagueness open for agentic AI, because it will go to the store, pick up the milk, and stop there. Because that's
and
what
just stand in the aisle holding
and just
milk.
stand in the aisle, I got the milk. Why are you mad at me?
So that's what this needs. It needs that level of detail of all the background information to do its job well. If you don't provide that, it is going to be a flaming disaster, because each level in the 5 levels of AI enablement that we promote at Trust Insights builds on the previous. So level 1, you got to learn good prompting. You got to learn how to prompt well. Level 2, you have to learn how to turn prompts into standard operating procedures. Level 3, you have to learn how to write project management plans from your standard operating procedures. And at level 4, you now have to almost write a job description that encompasses the standard operating procedures, the project plans, and good prompting to make these systems work well. So to exactly what Katie was just saying, we have to have all of that. You can't just, you can just wing it, but it's going to go very badly.
Right. And John, I would assume that, let's say we hired a new sales associate tomorrow, you wouldn't just be all right, go sell stuff. Good luck.
No, and really is kind of goes to the heart of the issue, is because the problem is not the process for training. It's we really haven't found a point where we need to throw more humans at the problem. The problem has never been not enough humans, and we've been able to use automation and AI to cover more ground so that, we still, even though we've continued to scale up, it's bodies aren't the issue.
So using the 5P framework, let's go in here. Let's bring up a text document, good old-fashioned text document. We're going to start saying, using the 5P framework by Trust Insights, let's design a sales prospecting agent that will research companies in the greater New England area that are mid-market B2B companies interested in buying what Trust Insights has to sell. Right? That's our purpose. And I'm actually going to put the headings in here. People. And what you can do is, if you have this set up well, you can build, you can FTP into your little box here, and you can add files to it, just like dragging and dropping, kind of like in Dropbox. So from here, I'm going to say the people involved are these two files, right? The company information and the ICPs. Here are the people of Trust Insights. And this is in what I call this thing. This is called sales outreach. Sales outreach background. There we go. So sales outreach background, company information. And to Katie's point, here are the preferred ideal customers for Trust Insights. And we'll trim off that information there. Process. Here is the Trust Insights sales messaging, product information, and sales methodology. So these are all things that we have taken the time to thoroughly document. This does not work if the agents do not work if you do not do this level of background work. It just fails spectacularly.
Well,
So,
and this is the not so secret that we're always telling people is AI is another piece of software, and the way to get software to move faster and do things is to do the prep work up front. Like, you can't get around it. You have to do the requirements, and our recommendation is to use the 5Ps because it's the most efficient way to get organized and the most holistic way to gather all of the correct information so you're not missing anything.
Yep. Out of the box, the built-in search in Hermes Agent is not great. I've found that I've had a lot of problems with it. So over on my personal GitHub repository, I have a private web search that does a bunch of things to help AI search better, so agents do a better job. So I've already installed it on this computer, obviously, because I've been running it for a while, but you would want to install that first with Hermes Agent as an MCP, and then tell it. And then performance. What is the outcome we expect? You have been successful when you have identified 50 prospects, including the company name, the stakeholder first name, last name, the stakeholder title, the stakeholder's email address. You will put this in the output folder in the sales outreach project as a CSV file. Do not stop until you hit 50 valid contacts for outreach. So we've given it a very clear objective. You got to keep going until you hit 50. And if you don't, you just keep cranking. So this 5P prompt, again, as Katie said, this is the best way to prompt agentic AI. We're going to put this in to Hermes Agent. So we'll go back to our lovely medical Caduceus thing here. And I have pasted in this thing. And now it's just going to kind of go for a really long time.
And what I think the thing to point out here, so why we're covering the Hermes agent and autonomous AI agents, the thing that you put in the performance, which was do not stop until you hit 50 valid contacts for outreach, you can do that with these, for lack of a better term, off-brand models, because you're not going to run up the same usage that you would on Claude Cowork, for example. So you can't tell Claude Cowork, don't stop until you've hit 50 valid contacts, unless you are okay paying overage fees on top of, depending on how deep the search is, it's going to go over your usage. And if you have a shared account like we do, then you're going to really kind of piss off the rest of your team because everyone's going to be locked out until it resets. But
Yep.
the reason we're covering this is because you can do that with these other sort of off-brand models that the usage is different.
Yep. So we can see in the chat here, as it's getting up and running, it read through those 5 chapters of the sales playbook. It found them and it identified, yes, the search MCP skill is there. And it already started writing just the headers of the CSV file. So it says, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm supposed to do. I have very clear instructions. And now it is literally going to go crank. Minimax in their control panel will tell you how much of your capacity you've been using. So this is, it's been running for a while now. It's used 348 out of 4,500 requests in this 5-hour period. And every week we get 45,000 requests, and we've used 5,500 of them already on here. This is the capacity you need to run a OpenClaw / Hermes agent / whatever. This is about the right amount of capacity. So less than this, and as Kay said, you're going to hit those limits.
Well,
now,
and we've covered the usage limits. Sorry, Chris. We've covered the usage limits in more depth and detail on previous episodes of the live stream, which again, you can get at our So What live stream playlist at trustinsights.ai/YouTube to learn more about what those usage limits are and how some of these other models can help you supplement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the question then is, what happens next? Well, what happens next is this thing just does its thing for a very, very long time. If you've set up the messaging gateway and turned it on, as we did early, it will say like, hey, I've done the thing. Or it can also, if it runs into trouble, it will ping you and say like, I need help. Like, help, I've fallen and I can't get up. As an example of what you can expect from it, I've had it cranking on trying to identify events that are happening within either in our industry that I care about a lot, or within a 2-hour drive from my house. And so it has pulled up this spreadsheet. This spreadsheet is 8,000 lines long of all of these different events and the URLs. And there's contact information that I don't want to show on screen here. That as a speaker now, I would go through, vet this and say, is Katie the best choice as a Trust Insight speaker because she's an expert in change management, organizational behavior, AI implementation, and AI enablement? Am I the best speaker because they want someone to push a bunch of buttons and do the dog and pony, like, hey, here's cool tricks for AI show? Is John the right speaker because they want to talk about the history of podcasting and business development? This lovely file here took 3.5 days for the agent to keep running and running and running. And it's very large, but I didn't have to do it. I did 0 of it. And because we prompted it well with very strict guardrails, like here's how you know if an event is valid. It has a working URL, right? So yeah, here's how the contact information is right, because you cross-validate with their LinkedIn profile, and so on and so forth. Again, I didn't have to do that. And that's what the value of these systems is they're even more hands-off than Claude Cowork.
Mm-hmm. Which is really interesting because I already feel like Claude Cowork, for the most part, for me, is fairly hands-off the way that I use it. I still have the guardrail set up of, check with me, ask permission, that kind of thing. But once you take out the, 8 seconds it takes to see what it's asking permission for and give it say yes, for the most part, it just does its thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, are you saying the best value for it's really all about the limits? It's not as much about the more or less difficult to manage the agent and put together the queries, but the fact that, you can have it run for 4 days and you don't have to worry about burning everybody else's credits in the org.
That's part of it. And again, it's, can you give it a fully self-contained autonomous task that it can just go and do? I'll give you another example. I get every day in my Discord inbox, I get a newspaper. And you're like, that's great, Chris. That's super exciting, except that it is literally the paper for my hometown. And it's polling, the agent built a lot of Python code that goes and checks City Hall and those things, and if we scroll down here to, upcoming events, there is a frog toad spring tea at the Framingham Public Library. Like, this is stuff that's not going to be in a regular newspaper, because this doesn't sell papers. Like hikes through history, Callahan State Park, that does not sell papers. That does not get people to click on things, but it's stuff that I want to know about. The agent built the infrastructure and then runs every day at 7 a.m. and drops this into my Discord inbox. And so I get a newspaper that is actually, I tuned and relevant to what I care about, as opposed to what is commercially popular. And this is what the prompt looks like. It is 13 pages long, following the 5 Ps exactly. Down to, here's what the database table should look like. Here's how you verify with this. In fact, I'll be more than happy. We'll put this in the Analytics for Marketers Slack group as an example. So folks can join over there at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers if you want to see what an agent, a fully autonomous agent prompt should look like. This is what it should look like.
And Chris, I'm pretty sure you'll also drop a link to your GitHub as well.
Yes, we'll put a link to the GitHub thing. Now, the last thing that's important about Hermes that is, I think, unique about it is that it is self-learning. So on this server, if I go into the Hermes folder, there's a skills folder. This skills folder, a lot of these, it built itself. I did not build them. So it created these things to try and accomplish tasks. However, I can add skills into it manually. So superpowers, the coding skills from Jesse Obra. There's a Hermes version. Yeah, I put it in here and immediately made everything better for its coding. If I were to put in the Trust Insights job to AI skill, which you can find over at academy.trustinsights.ai, I could put that in here and give it those capabilities. I could put the prompt to skill thing. I could put any of the existing skills, because they all follow the same format in here. But I also could look in here and say, are there any skills that I should take out of here that I might want in my regular Claude Code? Maybe it did something really clever. Ooh, let's see what we can take out of here.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the big takeaways is a lot of these systems now are, for lack of a better term, compatible. And so if you find yourself using, Hermes and Open Work and Claude Desktop and this and that, a lot of times the skills themselves and other instructions, there was a time when if you were building like a custom gem, you couldn't take those system instructions and put them in OpenAI and build a custom GPT. You actually had to adapt the language. And that was actually part of the prompt, is like, adapt this language so that it will work in ChatGPT. Now there's a lot less of that, and you can just drop those skills in without having to worry about where was it created? Will it work? Is it compatible?
Mm-hmm. And these agents do some really interesting things depending on the model you have them hooked up to and what that model's internal ethics are. So a few weeks ago, there was this website that was making its rounds on Threads, and it was a really obnoxious, just outright evil website. It was just disgusting. I was curious. I said, Hermes agent, if I give you a playbook, could you check this out? And it said, sure, I could check that out. What did it do? It built its own God mode hacking toolkit to try and break into the website. Like, whoa, slow down, time out. I just wanted you to do an assessment. I want you to actually go in and break into something. But then when I look at it, I went, holy crap, this thing did a really good job of building its own red teaming toolkit. And it was ready. It goes like, I'm ready to do it. I'm like, no, don't do it.
I mean, so, we have sufficient funds, Chris, but you would deplete our bank accounts with the bail money needed should you enact that.
Exactly. But
I think it, it sort of points to, and this is, John, this was, the point that you were making about, bringing on a salesperson, is you have to give them the right kind of background information. You have to give them the right kind of instruction. in order to get some sort of a useful output. And, Chris, obviously, I don't know exactly what your prompt was. We don't need to get into it, but like, it sounds to me like perhaps there may have been just enough vagueness in the guardrails that allowed for, your agent to go, I'm going to be as helpful as possible.
Sure did. Now, wrapping up, we're going to let this run, and we're going to let it run for however long it takes. It's probably going to take, my guess is, a couple of days, but you can see it's already taken it. It's got 3 different agents saying, I've found, the first 2 agents said, I found 10 mid-market B2B companies. And the third one said, I couldn't do it. I lost the plot or whatever. So it'll try and redo that. But we're going to let that run, and then I will obviously hand it off to John and the team to take a look at it and see if it's any good. To say like, hey, based on what we handed this AI agent, did it do a good job prospecting?
And I'll be interested because the way that you framed the instructions was prospects that would buy what Trust Insights has to sell, which was vague.
Right.
So
but I provide the sales playbook.
You did. So I'm curious to see if it connects the dots to say either this prospect will buy what Trust Insights has to sell, or this prospect will buy this specific thing based on what you've told me that you sell. Because those are 2 different outputs. If it says, yes, they'll buy what you sell, okay, then you still have to go back and figure out, but what thing? So that'll be interesting. And that goes back to the specificity of telling someone, go to the store and get some milk.
Exactly. However, if it doesn't do what we want, we obviously can take our prompts and refine them and things. And now what my hope is that for everyone watching this, it gets those gears turning going, if I'm good at being specific about prospecting, but it also drafts the pitches for me. If I add the HubSpot connector, could it put the drafts in my HubSpot? If I add the GWS CLI, could it put the drafts in my Gmail for me? And so on and so forth, and get you all the way up to the human approval, because you still want that. But I could definitely see this getting to the point where Kelsey or John walk into the office one morning and go, you have 30 drafts to approve today to send out. Just read them and approve them, and start that prospecting and go make us some money.
I was going to say, get out of my Claude cowork, because that's the stuff that I've been working on.
I have another version of this, which is running, which is totally different. That I was joking about with John yesterday. I said, if it works, you're never going to see me again. I'm just going to vanish, because I said, I'm going to give you access to the Robinhood API, which is the stock and crypto investment app. I'm going to give it $25, and I'm going to give it the access to the API for my account. I'm going to say, turn this to $100.
Okay.
And we'll see if it can.
Make sure you've got guardrails for margin calls and things like that. We would hate to see you have to come up with $20 million and petroleum stock.
Exactly. It will not have access to add funds to the account. It will only be able to, and there's a lot of restrictions exactly for this reason on what you can and can't do. But we're going to try it out and just see if it to see if we can do a proof of concept as with everything. See if can it even do this.
So to close out today's episode, John, I'm curious. So we started by saying, like, I can't think of a use case as to why you would need to use these tools, but my mind has changed. Has your mind changed?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of clarity. There's a lot more clarity than there was when we started, which is the important point. Because and you especially have led the charge with this, as far as like, we do see the idea that agents should be able to do a lot of the prospecting, and we already have cool stuff in production as far as writing scopes and doing stuff that we've never been able to do. But the other thing was kind of like, all right, well, wait, where does Hermes fit into this? This is not a $1,300 baseball cap. This is something else. Right. What the hell is this thing? And as is so common, you and I are just like, I haven't even heard of this. And Chris is like, no, this is the thing. You got to see this. And so we got to see the thing. And I think if I've got it right, like the big value prop for them is this idea that you can do crazier projects and more exploration, and you've got all the powers without causing havoc within your Claude cowork, which we already have and depend on day to day. So we can't have that go down because it's become operationally required.
Yeah. Yeah, don't get in my way. I'm getting stuff done.
No surprises. Back to the
No
surprises.
surprises. We've been over this. Katie does not appreciate surprises unless they are fluffy puppies or cake.
Oh, bag of money too is another.
Well, yeah, I'll take a bag of money that was gotten through legal
As to be
channels.
specific, where that bag of money come from?
I would like a bag of money that is not going to come back to bite me and that nobody is coming looking for it.
All right. That's going to do it for this week's show. Thanks for tuning in, folks. We will see you all on the next one. Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast and a weekly email newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.